It's about mental skills. It really is. All right, but what type of mental skills? Alicia, come on. Help me
just
out.
like focusing and like strategies and how to play with different opponents, how to deal with pressure.
Okay, so it talks about playing different opponents, gives you some ideas about the matches that Brad Gilbert played in his career himself. But basically, it talks about finding a way to win. The name of the book, Winning Ugly, right? Finding a way, even if it isn't the greatest tennis you'll ever play. Finding a way mentally to overcome opponents who sometimes maybe they're even better, right? They're better than you in terms of how they play, in terms of their physical fitness, right? But the mental side of the game can account for a lot of your tennis. So, with regards to mental skills on the court, what are some of the things that you associate with being mentally tough?
Well, being able to focus and
Say again.
focus.
So being able to focus, we talked about that. Anything else? Yeah.
Not being like too visibly angry. Or like
Not being visibly angry. It's important, right?
Yeah.
Everyone shows their emotions once in a while. Dennis. Not demolishing your racket. Why do you think that's important? A couple of reasons.
Because like rackets are expensive.
Rackets are expensive. The last time I checked, none of you guys have a sponsorship with Wilson or Head or anything like that, right? So either you, primarily your parents, spending a lot of money on your rackets. So it's important not to demolish your rackets. Why else, from a mental tennis perspective, is it important not to demolish your rackets?
So the opponent doesn't know that that he or she is injured.
Okay. So not to show your opponent that you're struggling, right? So technology used to be my forte, but not anymore. Let's see if this works. So I'm going to show you a couple of different videos. The first one, try not to get too excited about it. It is some examples of what we might assume are mental skills. Okay, so I try to find a compilation of some of the worst mental skills you can see out there on the professional level. Not good examples of how to behave. Does anyone know what the Serena Williams incident was? The video wouldn't start where I needed it to, but
Against Osaka or there?
up here, this wasn't Osaka. This was when she was playing against Kim Clijsters a few years ago. So I think it was in the semi-finals, maybe quarters.
Didn't she tell a linesman that she's gonna like shove a ball down her throat?
She told a lines person that she was going to take that ball and shove it down their throat. Which, I don't think she was being literal, I don't think she really was going to. But the point is, you can't do that to officials. You can't have those conversations. And I know that she's a role model for a lot of people, as is Djokovic, as is Federer, as is all the top players out there. Sometimes they don't behave themselves. So we've just tried to show you, thanks very much. Good. So we're just trying to show as many examples of what not to do before we talk about how to do things the right way. So, do I have to turn the TV on? So what is the difference between, we're talking about mental skills, right? So what is the difference between mental skills and mental toughness? Because you hear that phrase all the time, right? Oh, I was mentally tough, or I need to get tougher in difficult situations. Yeah.
Is mental toughness a form of one mental skill?
You're very close, you're very good, right? So mental toughness is one aspect of mental skills. In fact, if you work on these mental skills that we're going to talk about over the course of the next few weeks, you can end up being pretty mentally tough. Right? We'll talk by the end of the session today, we'll have an outline of some of the things we're going to be talking about in the next few weeks. Yeah?
Mental skills is like finding a way to win. Mental toughness is not giving up and not throwing rackets.
Sure. I would argue that if you're mentally tough, you're finding a way to win. But mental skills is like anything else. It's like a set of skills that you can learn. Right? not everyone is just born mentally tough. You want to say something?
Mental skills is like how you use your brain during the match, and mental toughness is like your resilience.
Okay. That's not a bad definition though. But again, if you utilize these mental skills, if you use your brain the right way, that's really what mental toughness is. Right? Being mentally tough can be an instance where you recognize some issues on the tennis court. You might feel angry, and instead of losing control, instead of getting angry, instead of throwing a racket, instead of shouting or crying, maybe you can use those emotions and turn them around to being a positive. So, we saw some examples of bad mental skills. Wimbledon of this year, the men's final and the ladies' final. Does anyone know what happened in the ladies' final of Wimbledon this year? Halep, Simona Halep, who's heard that name before? Okay, Simona Halep from Romania beat Serena Williams in the final, and it wasn't close. It was probably the best match of tennis that she's ever played. In fact, she said so herself. Right? So she won in straight sets and it was very quick. Right?
No.
So Simona Halep had a game plan. She went out there and she executed it perfectly. After the match, she credited her mental toughness, the mental skills, and the fact that she's been working with a sports psychologist as one of the reasons why she was able to execute her game plan so well. The men's final was a little different. Anyone know who was in the men's final? Apart from you guys, let's see if you guys at the back know who was in the men's final?
Djokovic and Federer.
Djokovic and Federer. Everyone knows who Djokovic and Federer are, right? Dennis. Anyone know who won?
Sad. It's extremely sad.
Better.
Well, you had a 50-50 chance.
Djokovic.
It wasn't Federer, it was Djokovic. Anyone know what was unique about that match?
It was really long. Federer had a bunch of match points, and then he couldn't convert, so then Djokovic came from behind.
So it was a 5-set match, went on for a long time, and Federer had some match points, but ultimately couldn't win it. Does anyone know what the score was in the 5th set?
It was like 12-all, 27-25.
I don't know what the tiebreak score was, I'd have to look it up, but they basically got to 12-all in the 5th set and they played a tiebreak. The first time, certainly in a men's final of Wimbledon, that they'd ever used a tiebreak in the 5th set. So, kind of historic, it was a great game. Federer thought he'd won his 21st championship, or 21st Grand Slam, but Djokovic ended up winning. So they were both very, very different matches, but they both talked about how important mental skills were. So, with everything that's going on with these videos, bear with me. But I have a video of Djokovic
Against
when he was talking about the final. So,
moment of frustration and that violation. Did you prepare that for the specific final? How did you feel throughout the final? And also it was a very subdued celebration. Just tell me about it.
Well, it was a huge relief in the end, honestly. In this kind of matches, you work for, you live for, they give sense and they give value to every minute you spend on the court, training and working to get yourself in this position and play the match with one of your greatest rivals of all time. That was one thing that I promised myself coming onto the court today, that I need to stay calm and composed, because I knew that the atmosphere will be as it was, and obviously Roger is playing well, and I kind of predicted the scenarios in my head already, visualized what's going to happen, but it was probably the most demanding, mentally most demanding match I was ever part of. I had most physically demanding match against Nadal in the finals of Australia. It went almost 6 hours. But mentally, this was a different level because of everything. And I'm just obviously thrilled and overjoyed with emotions to be sitting here in front of you as a winner. I mean, it was one shot away from losing the match as well. I mean, this match had everything and it could have gone easily his way. He was serving extremely well, I thought, the entire match. I had a lot of difficulties to read his serve. And, well, it was kind of a flashback of US Open when I saved 2 match points against him as well. But look, in these kind of moments, I just try to never lose self-belief and just stay calm and just focus on trying to get the ball back, a return which wasn't serving me very well today. But in the most important moments, all 3 tie breaks, I guess, if I can say so, I found my best game.
An incredibly courageous performance from both of you, I thought. Where does that courage come from? How do you prepare or train yourself to have that courage and mental toughness in the 5th set after 4 hours? You talk about visualizing what would happen.
Yeah. Well, I can only speak on my own behalf. Obviously, we spoke about power of visualization and preparing yourself for possible scenarios. And I obviously try to play the match in my mind before I go.
What was he talking about that was important in this match against Federer? What did he say that was critical for him?
Staying calm
Okay.
and visualizing like the different scenarios.
So first things first, we'll do them one at a time. Calm.
On the court, and I probably could not play this kind of scenario, but I always try to imagine myself as a winner. I think there is a power to that, and but also there has to be, next to the willpower, strength that comes not just from your physical self, but from your mental and emotional self, and I think it's, well, for me at least, it's a constant battle within, more than what happens outside. It's really not the situations that you experience that are affecting you, but how you internally experience those situations, how you accept them, how you live through them. So, I just told myself before the match, I'm gonna try to switch off as much as I can from what is happening around us, and just be there, be present. And I thought I could have played better, and I just explained why. But at the same time, one thing that probably allowed me to come back and save match points and win this match was the mental stability in those moments. And I guess that all of these things combined result, in a courageous effort, as you mentioned it. But there is not a specific formula to find the courage. I mean, at least from my perspective, you can go all out and just close your eyes and just hit the best ball as hard as you can, and then you can call that courage. But I wouldn't necessarily call it courage in some particular situation. So you need to be constantly playing well throughout 5 hours if you want to win a match like this. So I guess there's an endurance part, but I think there's always this self-belief and you have to keep reminding yourself that you are there for a reason and that you are better than the other guy. And as hard as the moment is that you are in, the more you have to remind yourself, the more you have to talk to yourself. I mean, that's at least in my case.
So in this match, you're playing not only Roger Federer, but you're playing, as you mentioned already, the crowd.
Yeah.
Decidedly against, or decidedly for Roger. How, even though you're going within and all the inner strength,
yes,
how aware are you of the crowd as the match is unfolding?
I mean, it's hard to not be aware. I mean, that kind of electric atmosphere and that kind of noise, and especially in some decisive moments where where we're quite even, and it's one way or another, and then the crowd gets into it. Of course, if you have majority of the crowd on your side, it helps. It gives you motivation, it gives you strength, it gives you energy. I mean, when you don't, then you have to find it within, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and on the same vein, I mean, can you take that energy and do you block it out, or can you kind of repurpose it and channel it?
Djokovic was talking about staying calm, right? It's not always easy to stay calm when you're playing in front of 12, 15,000 people. One of the largest prizes is on offer, right? It doesn't matter what sport you're playing, you see it all the time. You see it in the World Series for baseball. So here's what he was going to say. The last part of that video was talking about, because when you're playing against someone like Roger Federer, very popular in a lot of different events that he plays, right? One of the most popular players to ever have played the game. So the crowd is chanting Federer, Federer, Federer. And he said, well, what I have to do is sometimes I have to ignore it, and if I can't ignore it, I change it in my mind. I actually start hearing the crowd shouting Djokovic, 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 to which the whole room erupted with laughter. Because it's kind of funny, right? The crowd is saying one thing, and yet he in his mind is thinking it's about him. It's his way of dealing with that kind of pressure situation. Novak Djokovic, what did he say? He said, talked about staying calm, making sure that on the biggest stage, you don't lose your nerve, you don't get too hyped up, you don't get too angry or frustrated. But what else? There was a lot of other things that he talked about. Visualization. No. Is visualization. What is visualization?
Winning, like visualizing you're winning.
Well, hang on. Don't use the word visual in the answer. What is visualization?
Playing out points in your mind.
Playing out points, in this case, was points, right? Playing out the match in your mind. You can use visualization for anything else. Any of you use visualization at all?
Mental math.
Mental math. What do you mean by that?
Like I'm visualizing the problem in my head.
Guys, you want to share back then? Okay, figured. So when someone is talking, I want you guys listening, because it might be the one nugget of information that makes sense to you. Okay? So you're talking about schoolwork, right?
Yeah.
So you visualize a math problem. That's something I was going to talk to you about, but I didn't realize some of you already did that. It's awesome. I use visualization all the time. I used to use it in my matches. One of the weeks we'll talk about it specifically. I used to use it for all my big matches, but I use it now for every all-day situations. If I have a big job interview, or if I have a big meeting, or if I have something that's going on where I need to, talk to someone and it's a big event, I'll try and think about it ahead of time. I'll try and imagine the scenario, what could come up, what could go wrong, what could go well, okay, what the subject matter is going to be about, so that when I get there, it doesn't feel like it's alien, it doesn't feel like it hasn't happened, right? So I'm prepared. So that was a big one for him. I don't think he could imagine winning 13-12 in the fifth set, or perhaps even being 2 match points down, but I bet he's been prepared for that before. What else was he talking about? There's plenty more than that.
Thinking that you're going to win.
Okay. So the word absolutely right. The word he used was what?
I can't remember.
My handwriting is not awesome. Belief, self-belief. Doesn't matter what situation you find yourself in, you believe that you can still win. How many people here play tennis matches of any kind? Match play, all right, so pretty much everyone. Some of you are playing a lot of USTA tournaments, some of you might be doing the match play here. Raise your hands again. Come on in. Have a seat. Raise your hands if you've ever been losing quite heavily and somehow you've managed to come back and win. Most people at some point, right? So if you can be losing heavily and still come back and win, that should be all you need to know that it can happen. If you use your mental skills, if you stay mentally tough, sometimes you can turn things around. Some days your opponent's just too good. Some days maybe you're not very good at all. But as long as you give yourself an opportunity to stay in the game, there's always a chance you can win. All right, so having the belief is important. What else for Novak against maybe or arguably one of the greatest players of all time? Come to you, Dennis.
It's like stress management because the crowd was chanting.
Okay. So stress management. What does stress management mean?
Managing pressure situations.
So you're right, managing pressure situations, but how do you manage? If you're facing a match point against your opponent, what are some of the ways that maybe you could manage that stress?
Didn't you say that like you have to believe that you're better than the other guy?
Okay? So you've visualized already, you believe that you're better than the other person, but that doesn't mean that you're still not stressed in the moment, right?
Then you stay calm.
To stay calm. But so these are all related, but how do you stay calm? It's one thing to say, stay calm, stay calm, stay calm.
It never works.
But if you tell yourself to stay calm and you're not doing it the right way, it's not going to work.
Well, maybe just pretend that the guy is like someone you hate and then just smash the wall.
Okay. So hang on, for those that didn't hear, right, and people are laughing at this, but it's a very individual thing. Jack just said, well, pretend that you just don't like the other person. You might not like them, but pretend you don't like the person on the other side of the net. If that helps you focus and if that helps you get through it, if that works for you, great, do it. What is another example of being able to manage your stress? How might you do that?
Talking to yourself.
Talking to yourself.
Not like out loud.
Well, you can do that too, but people might think you're a bit crazy, right? But so we're going to talk about something called positive self-talk later in the, I was going to say semester, it's not semester, but later in the winter we're going to address all the self-talk that you can have.
Like just bouncing around, like
Okay.
happy feet.
Happy feet bouncing around. There's one thing no one's mentioned, and ladies, yes, I'm looking at you. At some point, just you can contribute. I know you might be a bit shy, but I'm going to call on you. As I get to know you, I'm going to call on you. Because this is going to be a very interactive class. What else might help you stay calm or deal with the stress?
Pretend to just like anyone, just like not like an important point, just any point.
Okay.
Like
So pretend it's just practice. Pretend it's the first point of the match. It's another way of dealing with it. What are some of the physical things you can do? Alicia, you were talking about bouncing around and kind of getting yourself ready. What are some other things? Yes. Breathing! My favorite thing. Right? So when you're stressed out, well, we all like breathing. I wasn't talking about literally the act of breathing. What do you, sorry, I jumped in a little bit early. What did you mean by breathing?
Breathe in 5 seconds, breathe in 5 seconds.
Okay. So controlling your breath, managing the breath, being mindful of not panicking breaths, right? So just breathing, slowly breathing in, slowly breathing out. That's a great one. I use that one all the time. I've seen some people in this room that could do with some breathing exercises, perhaps. Yes, Lucia?
not thinking about the point, like maybe thinking about something outside of the tennis match.
Okay. So allowing yourself, sometimes you want to focus in and really focus on the point, and other times you want to distract yourself.
Maybe like if you're like down and like it's match point per se.
Yeah. Because thinking about that stressful situation might be counterproductive. So you might need to think about something else, something positive, something outside. Yeah.
Like fidget with your strings to get distracted from the match.
Say that one more time.
Fidget with your strings to get distracted.
So fidget with your strings. So move your strings. Do you ever see So the pros do one of two things. One, they look at the strings. They move the strings, even if they don't need to readjust the strings, but it's something that they do. right? To focus in on the strings rather than the situation. What's something else that the pros do a lot in between points?
Like they have a routine of bouncing the ball and other stuff.
Okay,
That
so they
really
have,
helps distract them also.
so they have routines, which is perfect, which is another thing we're going to talk about in another session, right? So that's very important, bouncing the ball. But what else do they do between the points?
They like face away from their opponent and like cover their face with a towel.
So the amount of times they go to the towel, sometimes you need it, you played a long point, but the amount of times that the players will go to the towel and just in between the points, part of their routine. It's one of the mechanisms that they use to manage the stressful situations. Anything else that you can think of that Djokovic talked about himself? We talked about changing what he hears and changing the atmosphere. But if you're in a hostile environment, if you're playing, and think about other sports too, don't just think about tennis. But if you're playing in an away venue and the home crowd is really loud, it's really in your face, what do you have to try and do to that crowd?
Tune it out.
Well, hopefully you'll silence it because your sports will do the talking. I like that, but you've got to tune it out. What do you mean by tune it out?
Like think of something different.
Okay. Or yep.
Ignore it.
So ignore it. Tune it out. How? It's not an easy question, and there's not always a right answer. But how would you try and ignore it?
Maybe just try not to listen to it.
Okay, so it's very, very easy when people are directing, chants at you, or guys, that's not it. If you are in an environment where there's a bit of a crowd, trying to ignore it, trying to not listen to individually what's being said, that can be a big deal, right? Because if you can find a way to tune it out or ignore it, it can really help.
I mean, every sport there's always noises that come with the sport itself and not the cheering.
Mm-hmm.
So you could always listen to that. So like in tennis, you could listen to you and your opponent's footwork and you and your opponent striking the ball.
Yeah. And if you're playing in another venue where there's other matches going on, maybe it's just the sound of other people hitting the tennis ball, you can focus in on that. That's a sound that I've heard since I was your age. So it's one of those things that just brings back a lot of memories about me playing. So when I listen to the sound of tennis balls being hit, that can be a big deal, right? You focus on sounds associated with the sport, not necessarily the crowd. Yeah?
Focus on the ball, try to read what's on the ball, look at the stitches.
Okay. So looking at, specifically focusing on the object. In this case, a tennis ball. If you play baseball, focusing on the stitches of a baseball, perhaps. Right? Good examples. The other thing that he talked about is staying in the moment. This is a thing that's kind of overused a lot. Oh, just stay present, stay in the moment. Well, what does that mean with regards to a tennis match?
If you're playing tennis match and you don't think you've been playing well, then like the worst thing you can do is like scold yourself about what you've been doing.
Yeah.
Like you got to focus on like what you need to do.
Okay. So worrying too much about the
Yeah.
past, right? Or what's the other thing? If you're not staying in the present, what are you doing? You're not worrying about the past, but
You're not like you're not focusing.
well, you're not focusing on the present, but you might be.
Well, say you're playing like a first round against like someone who's worse than you are,
Yeah.
you might be thinking about the outcome of the match way too early.
So you're thinking about the future as well. You might be beating yourself up for the past where you've not been playing well, or you might be thinking, well, if I don't win this game and I don't win this set, then I'm not going to get through here. And so being present just basically means dealing with it, and it's a bit of a cliche, but dealing with it one point at a time. Literally going, okay, I'm a set down, 3-1 down. All I can focus on right now is the next point. So bringing yourself back to the present moment. So here's what I want you guys to contribute right now. I want you just to take 30 seconds to think about it. That's not an invitation to chat. I want you to think about some of the mental skills that you think you're really good at, and some of the things that you know you need work on. Now, you guys being here, either through your own decision or because your parents told you to come, the fact that you guys are here is going to give you an advantage over people that aren't. Sometimes maybe you can't come to all the sessions, but we're going to be covering a lot of different subjects, which we're going to go over now. But just to start off with, have a think about what you're really good at and what you're not good at. Anyone want to volunteer what they're really good at?
Emotion control.
Good at emotional control?
Yeah.
Awesome. So you're the kind of guy that never throws his racket?
No.
You're not that kind of guy?
I never throw my racket, but I always drop it by accident.
Dropping by accident is not the same as throwing your racket. Yes, sir.
Not showing emotions on the court.
So you're basically good at not showing those emotions to your opponent. Awesome.
Bring back, like, what if, like, I'm losing against an opponent, I'm usually able to find a way to win the match.
Okay. So being mentally tough or being able to make adjustments, being able to analyze the situation, that's an important thing to be able to do. Any of the ladies in the room want to tell me what they're really good at? Breathing, right? Having that control in between points. Being able to manage yourself. That's really important. Yes, sir?
Talking to myself.
Talking to yourself. Good. Hopefully.
It's a little weird.
Listen, by the way, we're going to have to get very comfortable with interacting, and this is a judgment-free zone. If you talking to yourself is the way that you're able to excel on the tennis court, you keep talking to yourself. All right? Dennis?
Got checked out.
You as well, you like to talk to yourself? Guys, pay attention. Hang on. Yes?
Staying calm.
Staying calm. I was not the greatest at staying calm on the tennis court. Something I had to work on. Right? It's actually a really difficult thing to do. Who cares here about their tennis? Who cares whether they win or lose, basically? There's a couple of reluctant hands at the back, but most people here who are taking it seriously care about the results in tennis. So if you care about something, it's tough to stay calm. All right, you want to contribute?
No.
Oh, you're just stretching? All right, that was the easy part. We can all give ourselves a pat on the back for the things we do well. I wasn't being literal. So, this is a tougher conversation. What are the things that you're awful at?
Oh.
Oh, hang on, there's more hands. Yes.
Staying in the present. Like every time I lose any point, I always think, oh, if I lose this game, then I'm going to lose the serve game because my serve's not good. And then I think, yeah.
Okay, so it's a bit of a landslide. You think about one point and then it free falls. Yes, at the back.
High pressure situations, and also if I'm like up by too much, then how to deal with that.
Okay, so there's two very, very different things there. What do you mean by the high pressure situations? What's a high pressure situation for you?
A lot of the times in tournaments, I get stuck in like tiebreakers.
Okay.
6-6 tiebreakers or super tiebreakers, and I just kind of break down. My tennis just kind of breaks down during those points.
So it is about stress management for you, and making sure you're able to perform even in those high pressure situations. The second part, I'm going to come to you guys, I promise. The second part you talked about, though, what was the second thing you mentioned?
It was dealing with when I'm up by a lot.
Dealing with when you're up by a lot. That doesn't sound like a stressful situation, right? Except it really is, because when you get up by a lot, what do you start thinking?
You can't roll this.
Well, first of all, you think I'm going to win, and then the second thing you think about is, oh no, can't lose from here. Don't lose from here. What would people say if you lost from a set and 5-1 up? So it's another situation that doesn't seem like it might be a tough one, but it really is. Especially if you're expected to win, or even worse, if you're not expected to win, how do you close it out? Closing out a match when you're up big is actually a really, really important thing to do with mental skills. Hang on, guys. Yeah, you wanted to.
Mine is basically the same thing about how I tend to push the ball and not really go for big shots on important points.
Okay. So finding a way to play the same way in a super tiebreaker as you would in the third game in the first set.
Yeah.
You know, and by the way, anyone that says that they don't feel pressure, or anyone that says that they're not aware that the super tiebreaker is more important than the first set, they're either oblivious or they're not being honest. I would say they're not being honest, because everyone knows that when you get into a super tiebreaker, the pressure situation is different. Okay? That's a good thing to work on. Yes, sir?
Controlling myself.
Controlling yourself. What do you mean by that? That's a big thing to say.
not screaming so much on the court.
Okay. So having better emotional control of the situation. By the way, guys, I want you to listen to this because we're going to talk about it later on, but this is something very, very important. Emotional control doesn't mean not having emotions. Right? You're not supposed to come out and then have an ice stare for your entire match and not be able to deal with the situation. That's not what emotional control is. It's understanding that I'm emotional, I'm frustrated, I'm nervous, I'm angry, and then I'm going to deal with it in a positive way rather than acting out. And the acting out is the screaming, it's the racket throwing, it's the ball hitting, whatever it might be. Yes, Dennis?
Like managing pressure while I'm expected to win.
Okay, so that's a tough one, right? It's easy, well, easier to play against people when you're not expected to win, when you're the underdog, right? You can get in there and you can play and you can swing freely. I'm not expected to win, so I can go out and play great tennis. It's really tough to be the #1 seed in a tournament, because if you win it, they go, well, you were supposed to win it, the #1 seed. But if you don't win it, then you feel the pressure of having been the top player and everyone else you're expected to beat. So that's a really tough situation. Yes, sir.
Like staying in a staying in a point, not getting impatient.
Okay. So within a point,
Yeah,
this is
like
important as well.
specific.
We've talked a lot about situations that are matches or sets, or we're up or we're down in a match, but within a point, being able to stay patient, stay focused, hit one more ball instead of rushing. That's really important.
Like in a game, retaining a high level of tennis, like playing one point really well, and then just like hitting a double fault the next point.
So, again, maintaining your level and not being on a roller coaster. These are all different issues, right, that we face. But all that's safe to say is that we all have things that we're pretty good at, and we all have things that we need to work on. Anyone else? Last one? Yes, Alex.
I have trouble focusing right before a point.
Say again?
Like in the first few shots of the point, if I focus, I have a higher chance of winning, and if I don't focus, which is most of the time, I lose the point automatically.
Okay. So focusing during the point, whether it's on the first couple of shots or whether it's for the duration of the whole thing. Sticking to your game plan, in other words, right? Having a purpose for each point. When you guys play, and some of you have experienced tournament players, some of you probably aren't, but when you play, what is my objective with this one shot? Not just with one I'm trying to win the match, but do I have an objective with this shot? Am I focused in on what I'm doing, or am I just going through the motions and hitting? Sometimes if I were to stop the point that you guys are playing for the people that I get to work with and ask you why do you do that, or what were you thinking, sometimes the response is, I wasn't. So there's always got to be a purpose behind what you're doing. Okay. Very good, guys. So, first class, 18 people. Hopefully that will only continue to grow. What are some of the things that you think we're going to cover this year? Anyone know? Anyone read the flyer?
Setting goals.
Okay. So first things first. Next week, for those that are here, we're going to talk about setting goals. Okay? Who sets goals for themselves? Not just in tennis, in general. Do you set goals for yourself? Everyone here has had to set goals at school, right? That's what they're... No? So next week, what we're going to talk about, and by the way, some people go, goal setting, that's not mental skills. Before we know, or before we can figure out how we're going to get somewhere, we've got to figure out what we're trying to do with our tennis in the short term, the medium term, and the long term. You know what, guys, I didn't realize that it is 5:02 already. Some of you have tennis. So thank you very much indeed. If there are any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you all next week, right?